Welcome to our deep dive exploring some fascinating reading rituals. We'll be looking at how different cultures, around the world approach reading, and hopefully it'll give you some ideas for your own reading life. We'll be covering a range of places, from Iceland all the way to the US and even beyond.
It is amazing how something as, I guess, universal as reading can look so different depending on where you are in the world.
Right. Okay, so let's start in Iceland.
Yeah.
They have this tradition, Jólabókaflóð. It's called the Yule Book Flood, and it happens every Christmas Eve.
hmm
Essentially, everyone exchanges books and then just spends the evening reading.
It's really charming, but what's even more interesting is that Iceland has this incredibly high book publishing rate, like one of the highest per capita in the world. So this Yule Book Flood, it's not just some quirky tradition. It really shows how important reading is to their culture. And it makes you think, why is that? Is it those super long winter nights? Or maybe their history of storytelling?
Yeah, it really makes you wonder how geography and cultural history can affect how we view and experience reading.
Totally. And that connection between culture and reading, well, it's something we'll see a lot as we explore other countries too.
Speaking of which, let's move over to Japan now.
hmm
Their bookstores often have these lovely cafes attached to them. Imagine browsing shelves and shelves of books and then settling down with like a cup of tea and a bento box and getting lost in your new find.
It's a very different experience than just, I don't know, grabbing a coffee at a chain bookstore, right?
Mhm.
There's a real focus in Japan on peace and quiet around reading. Even the bento box, with how it's all laid out so neatly, it feels like they appreciate order and balance. Would you agree?
Hmm. That's an interesting thought. It's like the entire experience, even the food, encourages you to just slow down and really enjoy the book.
Exactly. It's mindful reading, something a lot of us could use in our, kind of hectic lives.
Definitely. So from this quiet scene in Japan, let's jump over to India. It's a country with a really strong tradition of community storytelling.
It is, and it's a perfect example of how reading, or rather listening in this case, can really connect different generations. Imagine, elders sharing folk tales with children, passing down wisdom and history and all these values through stories.
It's like a living, breathing library, each story coming to life through the connection between the storyteller and the listener. And this ties into their reading of those epic poems too, right?
It does. Public readings of things like the Mahabharata are really big events, often with huge crowds. It's not just about the story itself, you see, but about that feeling of community. It's about connecting with these classic, timeless stories together.
Okay, so now for something completely different, let's head over to the UK. You can't talk about reading without mentioning the classic afternoon tea and a good book. Almost a national treasure at this point.
Right. Picture this. You're all curled up in a comfy armchair, a warm cuppa in your hand, and a captivating book to keep you company. It turns reading into this whole experience, engaging all your senses, from taste and smell to even touch.
And don't forget the sound of rain outside, tapping on the window. It's all about that cozy, escapist atmosphere. Do they have any other rituals, though, besides just the solitary reading experience?
Well, sometimes these solo rituals, they become more social. They'll have afternoon tea parties with friends and, chat about the books they've been reading. So it becomes this mix of personal reflection and then like sharing your insights with others.
That sounds lovely. It's like a way to understand the book even more deeply and connect with other, book lovers.
Exactly. And that whole thing of making a special atmosphere for reading, whether alone or with others, we'll see it in a bunch of other cultures as well.
Okay, so next we're heading north to Scandinavia, the land of, Hidge. They've basically mastered the art of cozy living. I've heard the reading nooks are amazing.
Oh, yeah, they really are. Imagine this, a dimly lit corner, bathed in this warm candlelight, blankets and pillows everywhere, maybe even a fireplace going. That's the Scandinavian ideal. A perfect space to unwind, get away from everything, and just lose yourself in a book.
It makes you want to grab a blanket and a good book right now.
Yeah,
But it's more than just physical comfort, isn't it?
you're right. It's also about creating a space where you can relax mentally and just focus. A space to truly immerse yourself in a story and forget all about the stress of everyday life. It's cool how these nooks become these like sacred spaces dedicated to peace and reading.
It reminds us that the right environment can really make reading even better. So now let's switch gears and soak up some sun in Italy. Instead of staying inside, Italians love taking their books out into the world. Think piazzas, parks, even historic libraries.
It's like their entire city is one giant outdoor library.
Yeah.
What I find really interesting is how they blend literature with their surroundings, all the sights and sounds and the history of a place. It all becomes part of the reading experience.
So instead of just reading about some historical event, you're basically experiencing it, surrounded by the same, buildings and atmosphere that shaped that event. That's a powerful way to connect with the past.
Absolutely. And let's not forget about their incredible libraries. Many of them have the most breathtaking views, along with all those literary treasures. It's a treat for both the eyes and the mind.
Okay, for our last stop in this part of our journey, we're going to South Korea. They've come up with a really creative solution for book lovers in their, fast-paced, always-on society. It's 247 reading cafes. Imagine this.
Good up.
It's any time of day or night. You step into a brightly lit cafe surrounded by people who love books, and you can just not read.
It's incredible. These cafes are like safe spaces for anyone who needs a break from the constant hustle of city life. They want a quiet space, a chance to think and connect with the printed word. And that's really interesting considering how plugged in their culture is.
It really shows you how much people still value books, for that sense of comfort and escape, no matter what time it is.
And what we've seen so far, in just these first few countries, is that reading isn't always a solitary activity. It can connect us with history, with our community, even with the world around us.
That's a really good point. We tend to think of reading as this private thing, but these rituals show that it can be, well, a lot more than that.
Be sure to join us for part 2, where we'll be continuing our exploration with even more fascinating reading rituals from around the world. Welcome back to our exploration of global reading rituals. It's amazing how different each culture's approach to reading is. Each one we've looked at so far has had its own unique way of doing it. It makes you realize there's no, one right way to enjoy a book.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's like each culture has found its own way to make reading even more, special. And for our next stop, we're going to a country known for its cafes and its, intellectual spirit. France.
France, yeah. It's the perfect example of how reading can just be a normal part of daily life. Imagine sitting at a sidewalk cafe, sipping on your espresso, people watching, and of course, totally engrossed in a book. It's a classic image.
It is. But it's more than just a pretty picture, right? These cafes, they've been gathering places for artists and writers and thinkers for, forever. They've always been these centers for, interesting conversations and debates.
Exactly. So when you're reading in a French cafe, you're not just reading by yourself. You're kind of tapping into this whole cultural tradition, this legacy of thinking and creativity. It's like the cafe itself can inspire you.
It's interesting how the French can balance being alone and being social so well. You're surrounded by people, but you can also just disappear into your book.
Yeah, that ability to find these quiet moments in a busy city, it's something we could all learn from.
Okay, so from the bustling streets of Paris, let's go to a place known for its peace and quiet and amazing smells, Morocco. Here, reading takes on a whole different flavor, literally, with the addition of their traditional mint tea.
Mint tea. In Morocco, it's not just a drink. It's about hospitality, connection, and sharing knowledge. And when you combine it with reading, it turns into this social and intellectual ritual.
I can just imagine it. Relaxing on a sunny terrace, the smell of mint tea all around you, and a good book in your hand. It sounds so peaceful and yet stimulating at the same time. Do they usually do this in any specific places?
Often you'll find Moroccans enjoying their tea and books in ryads, which are these beautiful houses with courtyards, or on terraces that overlook, bustling markets or peaceful gardens. It's all about that feeling of peace and connection with the environment, with the world of ideas.
It seems like that idea of connection comes up a lot in these reading rituals. Now, for our last stop in this section of our global tour, let's head back to, a place we all know, the USA.
The USA, it's a really interesting one because they put so much emphasis on community and achieving goals when it comes to reading. A great example is the popularity of book clubs. They're everywhere.
Book clubs, they're such a fun way to share reading with others. You're not just talking about what happened in the book, but you're discussing deeper meanings, challenging your own views, and connecting with other people who love to read.
It's like having a group of friends to support you on your reading journey. And then there are those reading challenges that are so popular these days. It's almost like turning reading into a game.
Oh, I love reading challenges. There's something so motivating about, setting a goal and then working towards it. Plus, it encourages you to try new genres or authors that you might not have picked up otherwise. Why do you think this focus on community and achievement in reading is so strong in the U.S.?
I think it shows that people want to connect with each other and feel like they've accomplished something in a world that can feel, I don't know, kind of lonely sometimes. These rituals give us a sense of belonging and purpose.
And it can be really fun, too. It's like turning reading into this adventure, this quest for knowledge and new perspectives. Welcome back to our final part on global reading rituals. I don't know about you, but I'm ready to, like, shake up my own reading routine after all this.
Me too. That's the beauty of, looking at all these different traditions. It really gets you thinking about new ways to connect with books.
Before we finish up, let's look back at some of the highlights of our journey. Were there any rituals that really stuck with you?
That's a tough one. I think Iceland's Yule Book flood really made an impression on me. A whole country celebrating books and giving each other the gift of reading on Christmas Eve. That's really special. It shows you how much books can, bring people together.
Yeah, that one was great. And those Japanese bookstore cafes,
Mm.
definitely a close second for me.
Mm.
Peaceful atmosphere, good food, a good book. What more could you ask for?
Right. And we can't forget about India's community storytelling either. The way they blend like spoken and written storytelling is fascinating. It really highlights how important it is to, pass down traditions and cultural knowledge.
It reminds us that reading is more than just words on a page. It's a way to connect with history, with other people, with, well, the whole human experience, really. And of course, those Scandinavian reading nooks, they know how to make reading cozy and relaxing.
Yeah, we could all use a little reading sanctuary in our lives, even if it's just a corner of the living room.
I agree. And those literary strolls in Italy, so creative. Imagine turning your whole city into a backdrop for your reading adventures.
It's a beautiful way to experience both literature and the world around you. It turns reading into this exploration, this journey of discovery.
Now, for anyone living in a busy, fast-paced world, those 247 reading cafes in South Korea sound like a dream. It's great that they have these spaces for book lovers, even in a city that never sleeps.
It shows that people still crave those quiet moments, a chance to think and connect with books, even in a culture that's constantly, plugged in and on the go.
So I think it's safe to say we've learned that there's no right or wrong way to read. The best way is whatever works for you, whatever makes reading more enjoyable and meaningful.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to try new things,
Yeah.
borrow from different traditions and create your own unique reading rituals.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we have a little challenge for you. Think about all the different reading rituals we've talked about. What resonated with you? What made you curious? And how can you bring some of those elements into your own reading life?
Maybe you could start a little book exchange with your friends or family, or create your own cozy reading nook inspired by, Scandinavian Haggai.
Or maybe you could add a little Moroccan touch with some mint tea and like a beautiful blanket while you read. There are so many possibilities.
The key is to be intentional about your reading. Create rituals that help you slow down, really appreciate the words, and connect with stories in a way that feels right for you.
So go out there, fellow bookworms, and create your own reading adventures. Until next time, happy reading.